everyone. Welcome to the Bird's Nest Podcast. I'm Joe Donahue. Thank you so much for joining us. We're heading into the deep off season once again, and the Eagles had their mandatory minicamp this week, capping off a spring full of OTAs, a rookie minicamp that happened earlier in May. And before the NovaCare complex goes into the quasi-hibernation mode that they go into when everybody goes off for the summer, we're joined once again by friend of the show and Eagles insider, Dave Spadaro. Dave, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me as always. And I would say it's been a pretty exceptional offseason. Would you agree?
I would say so, yeah. The Eagles went into this. They had a mission that they needed to accomplish. It certainly seemed that way. We've talked about that before here on the show. I haven't really had the chance to talk to you since the season ended because it was incredibly busy. But the Eagles, again, it seemed like they went into the offseason with that plan to try to keep from happening again what happened at the end with the historic collapse at the end of the season.
Yeah.
It seemed like, as I was watching it, though, and I would love to start here, the plan seemed to rely on the fact that this was really just a hiccup or a glitch in the system, and that was something that looms large over the mind of fans was that really a hiccup or a glitch? And over the course of these practices, what evidence do you see that affirms that it was a hiccup?
I don't know. I will start by saying, it was something that you take very seriously. I think Howie kind of addressed it at the end of the draft on Saturday of the draft weekend when he called it a mentality off season. And clearly, you take 6 losses in 7 games very seriously, and you look for ways to change certain things. Now, you also, at the same time, balance the idea that this has been a very successful program. In 30 years of Jeffrey Lurie's ownership, the Eagles have been in the playoffs 20 times, 6 of the last 7 years, etc. So you have to weigh it, and significant changes have been made, both to the coaching staff and to the roster. So to call it a hiccup it seems like it's a little. I understand what you're saying. I don't think anybody minimized the impact of what that
maybe
down the
one-off
stretch
would be a better term.
What's that?
Would one-off be a better term to describe that then for you?
I mean, but that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. I mean, the Eagles certainly went out and changed the defense, right? This has been an overhaul of the defense. They added a very key piece on offense in Saquon Barkley and some depth at wide receiver, etc. They changed both coordinators, offensive and defensive. They were aggressive in the draft after the first 2 nights. They made a bunch of trades. So I would think that you also, you rely on your core values, you rely on your culture, but clearly, and look, 2 really key players, Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelce, retired. So I look at it more like, I think every season is unto itself. I thought that the approach the Eagles took was an aggressive, creative one. I was interested to see how they would approach it. Look, teams have bad moments, seasons, cycles. You want to minimize that cycle. And the fact that the Eagles stepped on the gas and were aggressive as they were in free agency and as they feel as successful as they were in the draft indicates to me that this is going to be a really good football team this year. What I've observed here in this mini camp this week, it's very difficult, Joe. Nobody's wearing pads. They look great in shorts. They look younger. They look athletic. Defensively, they're flying around the football. And that's all really good to see. The enthusiasm's been high. It seems very cohesive. But to make a sweeping statement right now, I've been around a long time, Joe. It's very premature. But I mean, we're all very hopeful, and the NovaCare complex has had great energy, but we'll find out September 6th in Brazil.
That we will. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, I will say that the offseason, I will agree with you that the offseason that we had definitely inspires a lot of hope for the team. Because ultimately, you're right. It's early, pads aren't on. you're going around, it's basically touch football at best. And you have that, you still have a lot of questions because it's still a lot of installing the new schemes,
That's right.
installing what's going on with what are the ideas that Kellen Moore want to bring in, what are the ideas that Vic Fangio wants to bring in as the team moves forward into actually really grinding out this preparation period.
Preparing for a game. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I think that we're not going to know because look, they know the reporters are watching this camp, and there's all the guys are writing down who's playing where and who's getting reps and what's looking. And so generally what you find is that they install everything. The end of training camp comes, they close down the practices. They have 2 weeks to get ready for the Packers, and that's where you find out what they're going to run in the game against the Packers, and that's behind closed doors. But I'll say this, like, a lot of teams, Joe, they overreact and to a bad season, a bad end of a season. You can rip it apart, you can lay back, you can bring everything back to just one more run. I think the Eagles, the fact that they were so aggressive adding to the roster, challenging the roster, indicated to me that Jeffrey just gives the go ahead to be aggressive, and not a lot of owners do that. When you look at the amount of players the Eagles signed, traded for, the salaries that they added to the roster, hey, I mean, this team goes for it once again. This team, judging by how the NFL feels about the Eagles, based on the way the schedule is set up, the NFL clearly feels the Eagles are a primetime team. So, but look, it also comes back, it all circles back to number one, right? If number one is a superstar quarterback, I mean, last year his giveaways went from 8 in 2022 to 20 in 2023. His yards per carry were down like nearly a yard. Teams took away that explosive element, and the offense wasn't as dynamic. And the defense down the stretch played really poorly. Now you bring in an experienced defensive coordinator, proven track record, bunch of new players. A lot of pieces need to come together before September. So I'm really excited about it. I think fans are really excited about it. It's a great collection of talent. Merrill and I were watching practice, and he said, David, there's a lot of talent here. And there is. And like every other team, that talent has to come together cohesively and build great chemistry and build a great dynamic in the locker room.
Absolutely. And this is the time when really that starts to happen, is the forming of those connections. We heard A.J. Brown mention today in the press conferences that he and Quinyon Mitchell were exchanging a little bit of trash talk, friendly banter, as it were. How do you see this Eagles team starting to form those connections? Because from my perspective, at least, and I'm sure there are a lot of fans out there who would agree, the championship caliber teams, say what you will about Nick Sirianni's core values, but I do think that connection being in there is definitely a big factor in that, because the championship caliber teams that have been in the city of Philadelphia over the last several years, Super Bowl 52 winning team, the team that went to Super Bowl 57, teams elsewhere in the sports complex, the teams that have been championship caliber have been fun to watch both on and off the field.
Yeah, and Joe, it's true, and they also overcame adversity. And the Eagles last year did not overcome adversity. We talked so much about the great leadership with this football team, all of these veterans. Well, when the Eagles were losing 5 of 6 in the regular season, that leadership was not able to turn the ship around. And so the connection, which is the number one core value for Nick Sirianni, connect, compete, football IQ, accountability, fundamentals. Connect is number one. And that connection's already started. I mean, from the day the players got in for the offseason program, they are doing things that may sound silly to people, playing games after practice, tug of wars, athletic events, going bowling, going to NFL films, doing road trips, anything to kind of get to know the person next to you. And the theory is that stuff pays off when you really need it to pay off. What the Eagles didn't do last year after a long Super Bowl season Starting out 10-1, didn't play great football, but we're still 10-1. Once it turned bad, the Eagles were not able to get it turned around again. So why not? And I think that's really the question that will be answered this season. Have the Eagles turned around the culture enough? Because there are going to be ups and downs during the course of a season. Starting in Brazil against a really good Packers team is a tough assignment. So, how do you start things off the right way? The Eagles started fast, but they didn't finish strong. And then the playoff loss to Tampa was just Tampa Bay was just a very, very tough thing to watch. And so let's hope they learn the lesson. And I think it's a great test for the direction of Nick Sirianni's football team and the leadership in the locker room and where Jalen Hurts is as a football player and kind of just as a leader. This team needs him to be a superstar once again.
Absolutely. Speaking of Jalen Hurts starting to form those connections with Kellen Moore, starting to learn those progressions. There have been a little bit of reports coming out over the last couple of days where it's been a little bit up and down, and certainly that's to be expected when you're learning a new offensive scheme. From your perspective, based off of what you're seeing on the field, how does he seem to be taking to the ideas that Kellen Moore is bringing to the table?
Yeah, I talked to Jalen. We've had a bunch of events together, and I asked him about Kellen's scheme, and I asked him, did he think that there would be a significant difference in what we saw from the offense? And he said yes. So, I know I'm just seeing the running or the passing, and it's 7-on-7 largely. And so I think there'll be more motion. I think they'll try to get Jalen running the football more. I think the versatility, the ability of Saquon Barkley gives the Eagles just another multiple options out of the backfield. I really like having seen players like Paris Campbell and John Ross and Johnny Wilson, who's had a really good spring, emerge a bit, and how the Eagles handle this stuff up front with a new right guard and Cam moving to center, who I have absolutely no doubt will be a great center. So I think there'll be significant stuff, and I think that's a great challenge for Jalen. And I think he enjoys it. I think he and Kellen have really challenged each other, and I think everybody respects Kellen Moore and the track record that he arrives here in Philadelphia with. Success in Dallas, success in LA with the Chargers. So, I think everybody's really looking forward to seeing what this offense can be with, an extraordinary group of playmakers. Right? It is really extraordinary when you just step back and think about Jalen, AJ, Devontae, Dallas, Saquon Barkley, a great offensive line. Like, I've been around for 30 years plus. I've seen pieces of that. 2004, really good offense. T.O. lighting it up. But, and Westbrook and Chad Lewis. And who was the other receiver, 2017, really good offense, but not to the level of what this is or could be. So I think that's really exciting. And I'm really, I don't know how it's all going to come together, Joe. I know we're only seeing pieces of it, but I just, talking to the guys, there is a great deal of excitement about what this offense can be.
And that's certainly very hopeful. And that's certainly very important there to have that potential for where it could be. And obviously, you're right. We're not going to see exactly what's going to happen. Nick alluded to that in his press conferences.
First game. But the thing about it is, Joe, I'm sorry for interrupting. The Eagles will, as they always, you go into a game and you attack the weaknesses of the other team. By having all of these weapons, you can attack any way you want. You can play power football. You can get the screen game going. Gosh, we haven't seen a great screen game here in so long, right? You can hit it with the wide receivers hard. You can use Barkley as a third wide receiver. You can displace Anais Smith if he comes along. You can move Kenny Gainwell. You can do so many things. I just can't wait to see what it all looks like in September.
Yeah, it's really, really anticipating. This is the time of the year when there's so many question marks, and it's an opportunity to certainly hope for what's going to come out.
What's your biggest question mark about this offense, Joe?
Um, just how they overcome the fact that I think the biggest. Let me walk this back here. I think the biggest question mark in my mind probably is going to wind up the way in which Nick Sirianni and Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts and everybody blend to figure that out. Because the thing you went on Reddit last year and you said you were asked whose offense was it that was being run, and you said it was Nick Sirianni's, but Brian Johnson had the play calls last year, and
but it was Nick's offense.
I'm curious. The biggest question mark in my mind is where it what that is going to look like, and certainly not all that's going to be answered until September.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think the chemistry in the coaching staff is again part of building the chemistry. It's not just the locker room; it's the coaching staff also. It's having a feel, Kellen, having a feel for what works in the offense and what is good for Jalen at a particular time. It's establishing an identity with this offense, which I really felt last year that there was like that real crisp identity, you know? But I certainly think that the pieces are there to do whatever the Eagles want.
Absolutely. They're definitely there. It's all a matter of bringing it all together. You also talked about versatility, and certainly the versatility of the weapons is important, but there's versatility among the players as well. And this is evidenced in the fact we've seen reports here. Mekhi Becton's taking reps at multiple positions on the offensive line. You've got Cooper DeJean, who could very easily play pretty much any position in the secondary.
Let's slow down there. You know, you think he can. He's a rookie, all right?
He is. I agree with you on that.
He will learn safety. He will learn nickel. He will learn outside cornerback. How well he assimilates all of that information will dictate. I understand what you're saying, but I never look at rookies and go, that guy's automatically going to do this, because it's really hard to come into the NFL and play.
It is, yeah. And I wasn't trying to say anything to that effect of like, he's definitely going to be slotted in everywhere else. You learn, you progress through these things.
Yes.
But talk about that. Can you talk about that versatility and using this time as an opportunity to learn about the other positions, even if you might not be playing in particular roles?
And understand the reason it's done, Joe, is because Vic Fangio really doesn't know what any of his players can do and how they can handle his system. So he wants to look at them in multiple places. James Bradbury at safety, Cooper DeJean at nickel, Cooper DeJean at the corners, outside corner, Josh Sweat in different spots. So until you get a feel for how they can play the roles that you want them to play, you kind of got to look at them in a lot of places. And that's why when people are kind of tell, oh, this guy's moving to that position, or, you know, Mekhi Becton is playing some left guard. And, well, yeah, because they want to see if he can be an emergency guard. And Stoutland always cross-trains his guards and tackles and his centers and his guards. And so maybe something clicks. But that all kind of settles out as you get into camp, pads go on, contact is made, preseason games happen. But I do think versatility is really, really important for every football team, for every football player. In this league, you've got to be able to play multiple positions. I mean, a linebacker these days is not what we think a linebacker is. It's a great example. Jeremiah Trotter Sr. was a downhill smash up the line of scrimmage linebacker. Jeremiah Trotter Jr., and he was 254 pounds. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is 224 pounds. And he's got to play in space, and he's got to cover, he's got to drop. Jeremiah Trotter Sr. went into the line of scrimmage and blew it up. That's not what Trot Jr. is doing. So, you know, the game has changed. The field has been spread. There's speed all over. There's a lot more youth on this football team now, a lot of energy and a lot to learn, because the coaches, so many of them are new, and they need to find out what their players can handle mentally and physically.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's definitely important at this particular time, both for the coaches and for the players as well. So the players can have that conversation, that dialogue with the coaches and say, "Hey, I know you think that this is where I'm struggling," and the coach can work with the player to help them out, maybe get them into a position that might be better suited for them, or if something else happens, you or yeah, just try to maneuver the situation, so to speak.
And there's always going to be emergency situations that come up. There's going to be moments where you're going to need somebody to get you through a game, and that getting and watching the players take reps right now is kind of what you're experiencing. Just to learn, it's a feeling. It's still very much a feeling out process, and so I mean, I love all the hot takes, and I love the expectation. I think the fans are really excited about it. I know we're really excited about the football team, and I just reserve judgment, Joe, because I remember. Oh, now it's so funny because I was thinking about this name forever, years and years ago, before you were born, in the early 2000s, I think mid 2000, like around 2007, I'm going to guess. The Eagles signed this player from Miami named Lorenzo Booker, a running back. Do you remember that name, Joe?
I do remember that name.
And we raved about Lorenzo Booker in the spring. Oh my gosh, he's so fast. Oh my God, he can do all this. He can do all that. And I remember going into a scout and saying, wow, what do you think about Lorenzo Booker? And he goes, I said, what does that mean? He goes, you blow on him. Because he was so thin and so slight, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we had seen in the spring when they're not tackling, when they're not wearing pads, was that, oh, he's so versatile. Oh my gosh, he catches all these passes. Oh, he's so fluid. Wow, look how fast he goes through the hole. And then Lorenzo Booker turned out to stink for the Philadelphia Eagles. So,
yep. And that's also why you can't
judgment
evaluate draft picks until 3 years down the line.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I mean, look, I think I think what the coaches really look for right now is, if I'm teaching Quinion Mitchell something in the classroom in the morning, and I call that play in the afternoon at practice, I want to see how he reacts to that moment. What does he take from the classroom, and how does it translate to what he does on the field? And that's kind of really what they're looking at right now.
All right. Dave, last question for you. As we move into the off season, as we move through the deep off season, getting into training camp in July, who are the players that fans should be excited to see more from? We obviously know the big names, but maybe is there somebody who's maybe flying a little bit under the radar that fans should be excited to see more from?
So I'm wondering to myself, who is the number 2 tight end, right? And the name that I've heard the most, just kind of impressive step up 3rd-year guy, is Grant Calcaterra. Apparently he's had a really, really good offseason, really good spring. So that's one. I will tell you that at wide receiver, Johnny Wilson, Paris Campbell, John Ross is a former first-round pick, 9th pick overall, 2017. Fast as blazes, fun guy to watch. Defensively, Zach Bond, I know he's a free agent. He's getting a lot of reps. I'm excited to see him. I feel like he's one of those players who you can kind of fit him in, and all of a sudden he's a better player than everybody thought. Put him in the right situation. I'm excited to see some of the, obviously every rookie. Hey, there's my doggy in the background. That's Leon.
Hi.
Leon the pug. And so I defensive backs. I mean, the Eagles have Kaylee Ringo has been really good here in the 2nd year. There are a lot of young defensive backs here, so I'm excited to see all those guys, and so is Leon. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting. I think there's a lot of competition, Joe. I think it's going to be a very, very a training camp where you can go in and think, well, I think I can figure out the 53-man routes. Sometimes I go into training camp feeling like I'm right on the nose with that. I don't feel that way here because I think there's depth at wide receiver that I don't know about. I don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't know how it's going to shake out at tight end. There's a lot of linebackers here, So tune into the preseason games. We've got 3 of them on local TV. I'm going to be doing the sidelines. I'm excited as can be about it. And let's talk during training camp again and get a sense of where this football team is.
Absolutely. Looking forward to having you back on, Dave. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share your insights. It's always, always appreciated.
Always my pleasure. And make sure that Leon gets a credit for his contribution to the show as well.
You got it.
Thanks,
And
Joe.
not
Go
a problem. And
Birds.
thank you so much for tuning into the Bird's Nest podcast. You can support the Bird's Nest podcast by liking and subscribing to Bird's Nest Media right here on YouTube, as well as by sharing to your social media pages. You can also check us out on SoundCloud, iTunes, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, the Odyssey app, as well as at birdsnestmedia.com. And if you'd like to support us in a different way, you can find the link to our Patreon in the description below or at birdsnestmedia.com. Make sure you check out Dave Spadaro on PhiladelphiaEagles.com, as well as on Twitter and Instagram, the latter of which I really enjoy watching because he posts all the practice clips. So make sure you check him out on those. And thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, let's go Eagles.
Go
Birds,
Birds.
Dave.
Go Birds. Thanks, Joe.